Hey guys, this is Miss Arlequin, and in this video we're going to talk about the different types of questions that you might encounter on our state ELA test. Alright, so the first question we're going to look like is questions that ask you what something from the text suggests. So when you hear that word suggest, what you're basically looking at is an interpretation question, looking at the text evidence and making an inference, or it could even apply to figurative language. So looking at an example of figurative language and interpreting what the meaning behind that figurative language is. So you have to kind of really read between the lines. So what you're going to want to look for also is an answer choice that rephrases the line or rephrases the detail. So right here we have an example of what a question like this looks like. They give you a quote. He could sit and watch the tube and munch on some junk, or he could go to bed because it was getting late. What do these lines suggest about Terry? And so this is a perfect example of an inference question. From what Terry is doing in these lines, the way he's describing his actions, what is an inference you can make about him as a person, or his motivation, or his possibly even a prediction of his future actions. But in this case, it is an inference. Does he prefer to relax in the evening? Does he disapprove of snacking in front of the television? Does he want to do something different from his usual activities? Or does he waste time deciding whether to watch TV or sleep? And so, I mean, you don't even need to read the passage, honestly, to answer a question like this, since you're being given a line that you just have to interpret behavior for. All right, our next type of question, how does the author show that blank is blank? And so a specific example would be a question like, how does the author show that the volcano is dangerous? So this is an author's craft question. They want you to explain what technique or how the author is developing this idea. So how could an author show that a volcano is dangerous? They could explain it, they could describe, they can use cause and effect. So this is, in addition to being an author's craft, you can even think of this also as a text structure question. So you go back into the text, you find the part where you are able to draw the conclusion that the volcano is dangerous, or maybe there's even a topic sentence where the author states that, and then you look at all the details that kind of back up that claim, or the paragraph that is describing the danger of the volcano that allowed you to make the inference that the volcano is dangerous. So again, since this is text structure, even text structure questions that are phrased a little bit different are still this type of question. Like, how does the author organize the ideas in the article? So again, what's the text structure? Are they explaining? Are they showing? Are they relating? Are they describing? But here is question 28, which is more closer to the example question I gave. Which lines best show that night is different from the evening? All right, so again, you go back into the text. You find the section that it's talking about. You look at the actual detailed questions where you're able to make that inference or where you're able to see that topic sentence. All right, how about these types? These are summary questions. So there's always at least one summary question on the New York State exam. What sentence would be the most important to include in a summary? So you have to look for the answer which includes a detail that proves the author's main points or their central idea. Anything that is too specific or not related to the overall central idea will not be the answer. And in addition to also too specific, too general. Anything that is way too general for the overall article, you're not going to include that in a summary. All right, so here we have two sample questions. And they're both summarizing, but they're phrased a little different. Which statement would be most important to include in a summary? That's just like the sample question at the top. And then you also have this one. Here, they're giving you a specific detail from the text, and they want to know why this should be included in a summary. So this is actually a little bit of a harder way to answer the summarizing, or to meet the summarizing standard. You really have to know, when you answer this type of summarizing question, you have to know what the central idea is. And then you have to look at the specific line and see why this is a significant detail that helps develop that central idea. All right, next we have questions like read the following sentence or lines from the passage, and then they actually give you the lines, so blah, 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 that would be the quote. Which claim is best supported by this sentence? So this is a perfect example of this type of question phrasing. And here they're basically asking you to figure out what the author is trying to claim, right? A claim is a statement made by someone that could be proven or backed up. It may or may not be an opinion, but it is a perspective or an argument. So this is the same thing we do when we write short response questions. When we answer a short response question, that's our claim. And then the evidence we give proves that our claim or our answer to the question is correct. Let's look at this example. By taking what we already know, we can create opportunities for our children to participate in sports while keeping them healthy and safe. So we need to find the evidence that proves that participating in sports keeps them healthy and safe. Any evidence that shows that, that's going to be the answer. Why are lines blank through blank important to the article? All right, so questions like these are once again connected to central idea and author's purpose. So in order to answer this question, you have to know what the central idea is. You have to know what the author's purpose is, why they wrote this article. What are they trying to explain to us, inform us about? What are they trying to describe to us? What are they mostly trying to communicate? And then again, your answer is going to be the answer that shows why this detail is a key idea or a significant detail. It's also what you're learning from that section of the text. All right, how do the details about blank in lines blank contribute to the development of the article? All right, so a question like this might sound like, how do the details about volcanoes in lines 46 through 48 contribute to the development? Again, this is central idea. Everything almost always comes back to central idea. If you don't get the central idea of the article, if you're not looking at the way the author is developing their ideas, you're probably not going to be able to answer a lot of questions. So first, when you have a question like this, look at the part of the text the question's referring to. Think about what you learn about the main topic of the passage from that one section. If the article is about getting a good night's sleep, how does this one paragraph develop the ideas behind getting a good night's sleep? Is it showing you the consequences of not getting a good night's sleep? Is it explaining the importance of not getting one? So is it continuing an idea from the previous section or introducing something new? If the previous paragraph described what volcanoes look like, is this paragraph still describing, or is it now maybe moving on to cause and effect? Or maybe it's telling a little anecdote about somebody who got too close to a volcano. So overall, you're looking at how does the section help the author develop their central idea? So if the central idea is to show how global warming is bad, then how does this paragraph help do that? So here you've got an example. How do lines 36 through 46 mostly contribute to the development of ideas in the article? The phrasing's a little different, but it is the same kind of gist. All right, next question. What does blank reveal about blank? All right, so they give you a detail from the text, and they want to know what it reveals about a key idea or a central idea. What does the history of the word carousel reveal about the modern day carousel? So this is a question that's asking you to connect ideas. In other words, what do you learn about the central idea or a key idea from that particular piece of evidence? So answers might include things like it reveals something, it explains something, it's describing something, or it's showing a cause and effect relationship. All right, so here you see another example of a question like that. How do lines 51 through 58 develop a central idea of the article? And you can see the answers have those verbs. It's naming, it's emphasizing, it's describing, it's explaining. It's easy to eliminate some of these choices. For example, the verb describing, if that's what it's doing, there has to be descriptive language. If you go back to those lines and there's no descriptive language, then that's not going to be the answer choice. If it's not naming unknown lands, if that's not what's happening in those lines, then that's not going to be the answer either. All right, next, we've got questions that ask you about the author's point of view. Which statement best expresses the author's point of view in the article? So we've done point of view many times throughout the year. It is the way the author feels about the topic. So just to get a general gist in the right direction, knowing if the author has a positive or negative point of view, and then trying to get even more specific, a more specific tone or feeling word. All right. What is the author's main purpose in including blank in the article? So questions like this might point out a specific technique or author's craft. So it might be like, what is the author's main purpose in including quotes from this person in the article? Or including a description of the volcano in this paragraph? Including questions from experts? Or including figurative language in paragraph 4? So you got to look at the technique that the question's asking you to focus on, and you have to think, why did the author use that technique or include that detail? Again, this question wants you to think about what information, what key idea the author is developing with that technique. So you have to connect the use of the technique to the overall central idea, or the author's purpose in writing the text. Think about what you wouldn't know if that item wasn't included. So this is the what if strategy that we talk about in class. What if this wasn't in the text? What if the author hadn't used a metaphor? Example, the author includes a quote from an environmental scientist to show us how important it is to protect the polar ice caps. That could be a possible answer to a question like this. All right, our next type of question. How does the information in lines blank relate to the information in lines blank? So here they want you to think about what each section of the text is about, and think about the structure and how it connects. And again, this is all tying back to the way ideas are developed throughout the entire text. Is it building on the idea? Is it continuing something that was in the previous section? Is it maybe the previous section was describing the problem and now this section is offering up solutions? So think about what's the connection. Does one line elaborate on the previous? Or do the lines show a cause and effect relationship, a problem and solution? Are they telling events in chronological order? Is the author making a claim and then supporting it with evidence? Maybe supporting it with quotes from experts. All right, next, a claim question. What is the author's central claim about? Once again, a claim is an opinion, a conclusion, the point that the author is trying to make. And claims are always going to be supported by evidence. They're going to be based on evidence and then proven to you through the use of evidence. So facts, examples, quotes, statistics. How does the author support John Stein's claim that reading exercises the whole brain? So again, what kind of evidence are they using? Is he using description? Is he explaining something? You got to go back, obviously, into the section, and you got to identify that type of evidence. All right, our next question is, how does the blank propel the main events of the plot? So here they're asking you to think about how the story event is moving the story forward, how it's moving all these story events, the plot forward. So things usually move forward when a conflict is introduced, a new obstacle occurs, or the event moves the story towards the climax. That's the most exciting part of the story that everything builds up to. And it could also be when the event is wrapping things up. You're getting towards the resolution of the story. So here you've got an example. How does the arrival of electricity propel the main events of the plot? So this is something that happens in the beginning of the story. And so again, the what if strategy would be a really great tool, thinking-wise, to kind of try to figure this out. What if electricity hadn't arrived in that town? What event wouldn't have taken place in the story, or how would the character maybe be different? All right, and our final question type, although there are many other types of questions, this is just the final one for this video. How do lines blank help develop the plot of the passage? This is pretty much the same as the previous question. It's just phrased a little differently. So once again, you have to think about how the story event is moving or propelling the events forward. So again, use the what if strategy and really look at how this event connects to other events or characters within the story.